Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, they're going to get another Nintendo PC port out today, but not in the way you're thinking. That is because a developer going by the name of Cascaz has completely remade Donkey Kong Land, the original Game Boy game, over onto PC with a very specific Super Nintendo aesthetic. This is not a Game Boy ROM, this is not a Super Nintendo ROM, this is a PC executable that basically remakes the entire game and makes it have the charm of a Super Nintendo title. And honestly, I've seen a lot of projects like this, but this one might be my new favorite and most impressive as far as taking something like a black and white 8-bit game and turning it into a Super Nintendo style vibe. And I absolutely love Donkey Kong Country, so this is definitely going to be for me. Before getting much further involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. And I will say right off the top, Donkey Kong Land, way harder of a game, at least at the start, on the second level than Donkey Kong Country ever was. And I never played this game back in the day, but I have checked it out on Game Boy, maybe like 5-6 years ago, because my wife had a Game Boy growing up, absolutely loves Donkey Kong Country, and had this game, and loved it as well, so she's the one that told me we had to play it. And that is just because Mrs. Esoterica, biggest Donkey Kong Country fan you're going to find probably in the Midwest. It's just a franchise that she's always enjoyed, and we played all of the new Donkey Kong games together and always have an incredible time. So we're definitely going to be sitting down and finishing up on this one. Though I will say Donkey Kong Land can be a little bit brutal by making an ice physics level be the second actual level in the game. This one is shorter than a Super Nintendo entry, and I feel like maybe the developers kind of ramped the difficulty up ever so slightly to give you more playtime. But you'll see here parallax scrolling, amazing Super Nintendo sprites and graphics, basically making it seem like a lost Super Nintendo game in a franchise that everyone wants to play more of. And that in and of itself is absolutely a perfect reason to produce a remake like this game. Just be aware that the run button is going to be your biggest friend when it comes to Donkey Kong Land, because if you're not running, half these jumps are going to be impossible. That's what I'm showing you here. Yes, I know I have to run. It's going to give you guys a heads up because I feel like this one can be a little bit of a potential roadblock to people coming into the game for the first time, having ice physics and a lot of precise jumps on something that you just started playing. But even with the overall difficulty, this project is just absolutely outstanding. I love how faithfully it's recreated the game, while also improving basically everything about it. Because that is the interesting thing about Game Boy games. If you grew up with the hardware, if you have nostalgia for the games, and you love the aesthetic, it is still really easy to sit down and play them. But somebody like me who grew up with a Game Gear, I was definitely more of a Sega kid, so going back to 8-bit Game Boy games can sometimes feel a little bit antiquated even for me. But I know I just said definitely run all the time, but that isn't exactly true, because in some areas in this game, you have to slow down because this jump's only possible if you either figure out how to do it, or if you get lucky by blindly jumping off screen. And that kind of is an interesting thing about this game versus a Super Nintendo entry. Of course, it's still predicated more on a Game Boy kind of aspect ratio, so it's not going to be as wide, you're not going to see as much to the left and right hand side of the screen as you would normally. And I don't believe there was any sort of options to move this to widescreen whatsoever, because the developer's own information and their YouTube channel basically say that it's going to launch in a very small screen and then you all enter into full screen because it's meant to persist at the actual Game Boy resolution. This is a very faithful remake, even if it's completely an unfaithful remake at the same time. It goes for a Super Nintendo aesthetic, it goes for a Game Boy and Super Nintendo resolution, and I think it really works well because of that. Jumping off ropes every once in a while can be a little bit dicey though. You want to stay to the bottom of the rope. But again, this is just a first draft, and I'm sure you'll see improvements along the way, but there really isn't anything holding you back from playing this one today and having an absolute blast with it. I love projects like this. They basically give a new lease on life to a game that was absolutely outstanding back in the day, but maybe not many people have played or haven't played in a very long time. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me, if somebody could remake a Game Boy game in a Super Nintendo aesthetic, which one would it be? For me, the Mario games, the ones developed by Gunpei Yokoi, always had a certain charm to them, and I'd love to see them get a 16 or even 32-bit kind of vibe going on outside of Super Mario Bros. Remastered, which has done that for the graphics but not for the levels in and of themselves. But honestly, there's really very little to critique about this project, and if you want to check it out, I did leave a link to the developer's YouTube so you can see more about it. Let's go into the first of two soundtrack samples, because of course the music's going to be completely different, and I'll be right back with a lot more Donkey Kong fun. Definitely a hell of a lot better sounding than something like the Game Boy, and I think that really is why I sometimes struggle to go back to Game Boy games, especially not having grown up with one. The audio is fun, it definitely is a vibe, and I always say the Game Boy can create three distinct sounds: a beep, a boop, and a bop. But I love that you get the map screen here with the full animations with that Super Nintendo aesthetic, and you get so much better music, because that really is the thing for me in the Game Boy. The music sometimes just gets a little bit grating, and it gets slightly on my nerves. The good thing is with this PC port as well, or basically remake, I'm just going to call it a PC port because that's the nomenclature most people understand. There is no latency in the controls that's going to affect your performance whatsoever. If you die, if you miss a jump, it's because you either didn't push the button at the right time or you didn't have a good screen read on what was coming up. Although I will say every once in a while, the fact that some things are going to be off screen can lead to what feels like some unfair deaths, but it is the game doing exactly what it should be doing, which is properly remaking the Game Boy experience. And like I said, you leave me a comment down below and you tell me if you found the Game Boy game hard, if you played this and found this maybe not hard, but a little bit more difficult than you were expecting. And I get it, I am not the best at every single game. I play over 600 a year, so I can't be an expert at everything, but this one gave me some challenge, but I kind of actually enjoyed that challenging nature of it. And I want something I can breeze through. I want something that's going to push back a little bit, especially in the modern era of gaming where I kind of feel like some things don't give you any challenge whatsoever. And I love the rope level here. It is just so inventive, basically making you go up and down on the screen to be able to avoid the yellow jackets. Or maybe they're hornets. I've never actually remembered their name on this one. Leave me a comment down below and you tell me. But if you do get hit by one, make sure you hold right on the screen, because by default that rope is going to continue to go into the right of the screen while your character jumps straight down, unless you actually have a D-pad input on this one. But again, this is something that I think is going to bring this game to a much wider audience, because when people see new N64 games, they go crazy on the channel, and new quote-unquote Super Nintendo games people go for as well. But again, I'm going to reiterate, this is not running on Super Nintendo, this is a PC executable, but because it has every single vibe and look and feel of a Super Nintendo game, it basically is a Super Nintendo game, at least in my heart. And people that never played the Game Boy version might find a lot to love about this one, because right now, obviously we get a new Donkey Kong game for the Switch too, but it wasn't a country game, and I really hope we see something in that, I guess, sub-franchise at this point in time, because I want to get some more Donkey Kong Country in my life, as you do as well, I'm sure. So in the interim, maybe Nintendo will never give us anything, we just don't know. You have fans bringing us games like this, and that is always a fun time, because right now in 2026, we're basically in the new golden era for Nintendo developments. We have recomps, we have PC ports, we have stuff like full remakes, so we even have some Super Nintendo recomps that I've already talked about on the channel. We'll be talking about more soon. But this one definitely takes the brass ring, or I guess the gold banana in this instance, because it is so creative, it is so inventive, and it really does give a new lease on life to a game that I think definitely needed it. Well, let's do one more soundtrack sample, because again, the music in this one is way more pleasing to the ear than Game Boy music, at least in my opinion. So go ahead and listen for 35 seconds and I'll be right back with a bit more news on this. Everything about the sound of Donkey Kong Country is iconic, from the soundtrack to the sound effects to everything else. So bringing a lot of that into Donkey Kong Land and porting it to PC makes it sound, look, and play that much better. And that is definitely a win for each and every one of us. But again, you leave me a comment down below and you tell me if there was one Game Boy game you could make show up as a port, whether it's to the Super Nintendo with perfect graphics or to the PC like we're playing here. Again, which one would it be? I already gave you my answer, but I know you guys have a lot of fun and creative games out there that you always talk about, and sometimes you even surprise me. But this one is one that I feel like was definitely needed and definitely will be appreciated, because I again sat down right before I did the voiceover to play a little bit of the actual Game Boy original, and while I did have a fun time, I could tell that it was just a little bit aged and antiquated for me personally to actually sit down and play 100% of it from start to finish. But I'm sure that's a little bit nostalgia as it is anything else, because I just didn't have that Game Boy growing up, where I feel like my wife might actually sit down and play the whole thing because she remembers it way more fondly. but we need more Donkey Kong in our life, and we need more projects like this, bringing Nintendo classics into a new era for new people. Obviously, it's not going to be something like a 32-bit or 64-bit game. It still feels like that classic Super Nintendo vibe, but for people that grew up with that system and love the Donkey Kong Country games, still maybe the best trilogy in gaming in my opinion. This is going to definitely hit. But also, that makes me think of a new question. Best trilogy in gaming, I would say Donkey Kong Country, right up there on the list, but I think maybe Crash Bandicoot on PlayStation 1 would be my pick. But I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.